Well, hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. We've got some more chairs coming out in the back, so please, everybody, if you need a seat, just chat with Joe, and he'll make sure that you're really comfortable. It is awesome to see you all tonight. Happy FAWC Friday. Woo! I was excited about this event because I got to say February FAWC Friday and really embrace the alliteration. I am so filled with gratitude to be in this room this evening. First, it was so wonderful to kick off tonight with some seasonal comfort food from Dancing Spoon's food truck. Huge thank you to them for feeding us all so well tonight. And please join me in a round of applause for DJ Sam Sewell. Sam, you have set the perfect vibe for a cold February night. Thank you so much. Well, my name is Sharon Poley, and I am the executive director here at the Fine Arts Work Center. And tonight, we honor our collective creative spirit and our hope for a more beautiful and just world. Tonight in the gallery, there is an exhibition poster that reads, "Gracias a la vida." And that is exactly how I feel tonight, just filled with gratitude for life and for all of you. The Fine Arts Work Center is an artist-led organization that supports artistic freedom, nurtures creative connections, and makes possible artistic achievements that are important to the larger culture. And our fellowship program is essential to this mission. I am so excited that we will soon kick off our series of Fellow Fridays, where our fellows in residence will have the chance to share with all of you all of the cool things that they've been working on. There are schedules in the back, and we hope that you all will come and join us for each of those upcoming events from February through April. But let's live in the moment tonight, shall we? Tonight, we are activating spaces all throughout our campus with music, art, books, food, and conversation. A huge thanks to the FAWC staff who are hanging in the back. Can we just give them a giant round of applause? The best team ever. So we kick off tonight with two very special visiting artists, writer Philip Hoare and artist Arghavan Khosravi. All right. Following their presentations, I'm really, really excited and pleased that Philip and Arghavan will join us for a moderated audience Q&A, so please get all of your great questions in your head. Philip will also be available to sign copies of his work, Albert and the Whale, which are available at the back. And then from 7:30 to 9, we invite you to visit Open Studios, featuring a selection of our fellows. And in the Hudson D. Walker Gallery, do not miss the gallery activation by Buena Grafica's Social Studio. Graphic designers Tatiana Gomez-Gaguero and Jose Menendez are wonderful partners to the Fine Arts Work Center. They designed our logo. And we are so honored that they are here tonight sharing the exhibition Grafica Latina. And of course, in our print shop, if you want to take part in some hands-on printmaking, Vicky Tomeko will lead some activities, so stop by there. All of the spaces that are marked with a banner are open for you to visit. And finally, thank you to East End Books, our favorite, beloved local independent bookseller, who manages our pop-up bookshop. All right. Jeff is not here with us tonight, but we say a huge thank you to Jeff Peters. And finally, I just want to say a huge heartfelt thank you to all of you that support the Fine Arts Work Center and our legacy. We truly could not fulfill our mission without your generosity. So it's my pleasure now to introduce my dear colleague, Naya Bricker, who will come to the stage and welcome our first guest. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sharon, and welcome everyone to our FAWC Friday. It is a tremendous pleasure to introduce our visiting artist this evening, Arghavan Khosravi. I'm thrilled to welcome her back home to Provincetown after her Fine Arts Work Center Fellowship during the winter of 2018-2019. Born in Iran, Arghavan now lives and works in Stamford, Connecticut. She earned an MFA in painting from the Rhode Island School of Design after completing the studio art program at Brandeis University. She previously earned a BFA in graphic design from Tehran Azad University and an MFA in illustration from the University of Tehran. She has exhibited both nationally and internationally in solo and group exhibitions. Her most recent solo exhibitions were at the Rose Art Museum in Waltham, Mass., the Newport Art Museum in Rhode Island, and the Rachel Uffner Gallery in New York. And this year she has a forthcoming exhibition at the M&B Gallery in Los Angeles. A distinct visual characteristic of her paintings is their multidimensionality. Constructed from a complex scaffolding of cut and painted wood panels, they offer a constantly shifting perceptual experience. Visual motifs, such as black plumes, rockets, and cages, reference corrupted economic and political systems, while female bodies are often depicted as being shackled or with their mouths sewn shut. She investigates the aesthetics of ancient Persian miniature paintings. These traditional works often portrayed women in subservient roles, devoid of agency and social significance. Her paintings challenge this historical narrative and critically examine how these visual representations continue to influence and shape gender politics in Iran today. So please join me in a warm welcome to Arghavan Khosravi. We're looking forward to tonight's presentation, and welcome back.
Thank you, Naya, for the generous introduction. It feels great to be back here in Provincetown. It really feels like home. Okay. So my work is mostly reflecting on my life experiences and memories from Iran. And for me, painting is really a way to cope with like traumatic events in my life. And for me, it's like a coping mechanism, and it has really a healing quality. To give you a little bit of background about myself, I was born in Iran shortly after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, which overthrew a Western-friendly monarchy in hopes of bringing real democracy to the country. But what happened shortly after the revolution was that the Islamic hardliners took over the power and silenced all the other voices that they were participating in the revolution. So the formative years of my life, in my childhood, I grew up during this constant confrontation between like religious, traditional, ideological, ideology, and then a more secular, progressive way of living. So most of my work is reflecting on that, and I'm usually interested in showing these at the beginning of when I talk about my work, because it was the first time that I figure out what I want to say in my paintings. These are drawings that I made on silk screen printed images that I found from a religious context, whether it was a tile pattern in a mosque or, for example, a Quran cover. And I painted on top of that my own narrative and imagery. And for me, it was like a visual translation of that contradiction that was part of, and for most Iranians, it's part of their everyday life, this duality of the private space and the public space. And I was really interested in this idea of having a found image to start my paintings with. And back in 2016, I was studying, and I was a student here, and I traveled back to Iran. And shortly when I came back, the so-called travel ban, the Muslim ban, was signed by the previous administration, and it prevented citizens of 6 Muslim majority countries to enter the United States. So I was very, very, very angry of what had happened, because if I had only stayed back home a week longer, I couldn't come back and finish my studies here. And I happened to bring some of 2 of my expired passports with me, and I started to just draw on those pages and then build these like frames to add another layer of meaning and treat them like something precious as a symbol of my nationality. And then I enlarged like blank pages of my passport and painted on top of them. And the more I worked on this series, my work became less and less about that specific political moment, and it became more about my memories from Iran, because at this point I wasn't sure when I will be able to travel back home. So beyond the very immediate feeling of nostalgia, I started to think about my memories from Iran, and that's where like the issues around women, the gender equality, and human rights issues in general became very, like they became to the foreground of my mind. And I still like this idea of how those found printed images helped me to activate my creativity, and I didn't have to start my paintings from a blank surface. So I thought, what are the other options that I can experiment with, and found textile was one of them. And this is, for example, one of the works from that series that I painted on a found textile from which my father sent from Iran. It was a prayers rock, and you can see it, and it has like some Arabic texts with some like Islamic contexts. And then I was interested in appropriating that image you can see in that Della Francesca painting, and sort of this, and again it felt relevant to this idea of this duality and contradiction that is a constant theme in all of my works, like having some imagery from a Western Christian context painted on something that is coming from an Eastern Islamic, an object which is a praying mat, and then some other elements that reference something to a more contemporary time, like the neon lights, like the neon halo, or the bubble gum, and also like the railing, which is from Persian miniature paintings. Speaking of Persian miniature paintings, it's one of the main sources of inspiration for me, and I look at them whenever I feel like I need inspiration and I run out of ideas. And one of the aspects of these works which always fascinate me is that, so these works are usually or almost always painted to be part of a book. So there has been always two picture planes for the artist to work with. One, like the rectangle, which is the page of that book, and then another frame that the artist paints inside that rectangle. And then there are some moments like some parts of architecture or landscape or figures that are growing out of that rectangle. And I thought, how can I translate that into my own work? So that's how I came up with the idea of making this shaped canvases to sort of translate that into my own work. And by the way, this work and the work prior to this, I made those while I was a fellow here. So it feels good to show them with you, share them with you. And this is the reference. So the architectural space in that miniature paintings was the starting point for this. And you can see like in terms of the subject matter, my work is becoming more about the female body, the gender dynamics, and but more through a symbolic approach. So the works can be accessible to a wider audience depending on their own experiences. And when I started working on these shaped panels, as the moment that the works are not a rectangle, the painting became more and more like an object. And so I was working on those shaped panels, and then COVID happened, and I didn't have access to my studio, and I had to bring my painting supplies to the corner of our living room. And I didn't like how the small scale of the small space I had dictates the scale of my work. So I wanted to make even larger pieces. So I came up with this idea of breaking down each work into sections, and then I could work on smaller panels, and then eventually at the gallery space they could be assembled and create a larger piece. And this gave me the opportunity to have different depths for each panel, so my work became more sculptural, and then I could incorporate some found objects or elements, like here you can see these like black ropes or cords that are actual rubber cords. And I'm always trying to bring more and more symbols into my visual vocabulary. And here I started to using this symbol of shackle, ball, and chain, and eventually I reduced the image of chain to just these black lines, which you can see in my later work. And these are like obvious symbols of lack of freedom. And in general, I should say that I'm very interested in having these very simple symbols and metaphors, like ball, chain, and shackle, or birds, or these like paradisical gardens, and then trying to complicate them and layer them and say something more complicated than those simpler visual alphabets that I started my sentence with, if that makes sense. Another aspect of these miniature paintings that I'm very fascinated by is how architecture is depicted. The way the architecture is depicted in these works is that there is no perspective or depth the way we know it. There's no vanishing point, so the space looks flattened. And you can also look at look from two angles at the same time to one scene. For example, the lower part here, it's a pool if you look at it from above, and then the rest of the painting is as if you look at it like straightforward. And I was interested in translating this quality into my own work and sort of subverting that notion of flatness. And also in these works, mostly, not always, women have secondary roles and lack agency, and I wanted to subvert that too. So I created a series of works that are based, each work was based on a historic Persian miniature painting, but then I created these like three-dimensional panels to subvert that idea of flatness and create space. And then I placed these like female figures or cropped portraits of female figures that are rendered very realistically in that unreal flattened space. And also they're proportionally very larger to the buildings that are surrounding them, and which you can read into it more metaphorically. And another element in these historic Persian miniature paintings, which for me was interesting, is that whenever they wanted to paint water, like a stream of water or a pool, they had used silver pigment, and over time the pigment has been oxidized and now it's black. And that black liquid, like coming from the mountains and creating these like, it felt like oil. And like in these oil-rich countries in the region, there is this correlation between lack of democracy and the oil money. And I thought that it felt relevant to what I was already thinking about and talking about in my work about lack of freedom of speech and all those issues about human rights and women's rights more specifically in general. So it felt relevant to what I was doing. And this is another work from the same series that was based on a Persian miniature painting and the architectural space. And I'm always interested in bringing, as I said, expanding my visual vocabulary, like having like some symbols like fire, or the black ball, which refers to the ball, chain, and shackle symbol, and on the other side, like the vivid, colorful shapes you can see as parts of her portrait, or the key. And also something else that has become like a recurring element in my work is this image of curtains, which is something I have in some of my works. And for me, it's an object that separates the private space from the public space. And as I said, this dual life and duality is something that becomes part of your DNA when you're born and you grew up in Iran, because there are certain things that you can't do in public. There are some rules that are imposed on you in public, and in private you can have your safe haven that you can act and think freely. And for me, curtain is this symbol that separates these two spaces. And to some extent, everywhere this distinction exists, but in countries like Iran, it's harsher. And in this work, I was interested in subverting that notion of private and public. For example, outside, these chaotic battlefield scene, which I appropriate from a miniature painting, is happening, and inside you can see, for example, the sky, which suggests an outdoor space. And most of the figures, their faces are cropped or covered and obscured, and the only way you can see the only emotion that is conveyed is through this Greek Roman sculpture that you can see here. And if you peek in from an angle, you can see that the person here is reading a book, which is another recurring element in my work, which obviously you can know what is it standing for. So these battlefield scenes, as you can see here, is something that I often have in my work. For example, so it's something that with these scenes that I appropriated from miniature paintings, I think of them as not a physical, literal attack, but more on a psychological or emotional level. And it can, depending on the context you think about it, it can be read as patriarchy, misogyny, or a more systematic governmental kind of oppression of women that I have in my most works. And here you can see they're blindfolded as if they don't know who they are attacking, lack of knowledge. So all these works were done before the last year's woman life freedom movement in Iran. After these movements, that the triggering point or the starting point of this movement was the murder of Mahsa Jina Amini in police custody because she was not wearing her hijab, the compulsory hijab, properly. I was very inspired by the bravery of the Iranian women and men, and how the protests, it started around a women rights, a women equalities issue, and it was sort of led by women. I was very inspired, and I wanted to reflect on those works, on those protests in my own work. And I created these body of work that they were exhibited at the Rose Art Museum, inspired by those movements. So for example, here you can see that I appropriated those war clothes and accessories that in miniature paintings you could see on the soldiers. Here on these women portraits that are larger than life. And it was the first time I experimented with fully three-dimensional works. So you could walk around each work and look at it from different angles. And you could, the other thing in these works was, again, the notion of duality. So on each side, there was something contradicting the other side. For example, here, the eyes are covered, and on the other side, she was looking back at you. Or in this work, that if you look at it straight to the piece, her eyes were closed, but if you moved your head and looked at her reflection in the mirror, you could see that she's staring back at you. And then the pedestal and the whole shape that this sculpture forms resembles a missile, or as a symbol of resistance or fighting back. which was something that the protesters in Iran were doing. And I was expanding on that idea, and I made some works based on these like Persian 4-mirror armor, which they were usually used wrapped around the warrior's body. And in this suspended work, you can see how it has been translated into a symbol of resistance, and that like the fist that you could look at it from both sides also emphasizes on that. This is another work from the same series, that it's the same object, but it's flattened out. And another thing which I would like to point out is that, so the whole thing that started those protests was that a young woman didn't cover her hair properly. So the image of hair itself became a symbol of resistance and protest. And until now, it has become a political subject matter. So women are not covering their hair every day in public as a way of resistance and defying the rules of compulsory hijab. So in this work, I was interested in how like this flow of hair becomes like a column that the whole painting is standing on. And another thing that you could see in those protests was this image of women cutting their hair. So like the scissors is referring to that. And here you can see an overall installation shot of the exhibition. And I was very interested in how these works are larger than life, and they have a strong presence that you cannot ignore them. They're into your face when you enter the exhibition space. This is another view that, again, thank you. Thanks.
Can we have another hand for Arghavan, please? Such beautiful, provocative work. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for sharing with us, Arghavan. My name is David Simpson. He, him. I'm the program director here at the Fine Arts Work Center. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Look at this big crowd. This is really awesome. So great for February night. Thank you all for coming. Big hand again for Sam Sewell for DJing this evening. And for Dancing Spoons Food Truck for providing all the wonderful food. I'm here to introduce Philip. As I was preparing for the event this afternoon, I got an email from a woman who's a friend of the Fine Arts Work Center telling me how sad she was that she wasn't going to be able to attend tonight. And she described Philip Hoare as the Shakespeare of the natural world. So we're going to start off with that. Philip has been a lovely presence here at the Work Center for a long time. His smile and sense of humor always brighten our days, and we're so pleased to welcome Philip today to share his work on our final FAWC Friday. But don't be sad, because next week our fellow showcases begin, and you'll be able to come back here to see some wonderful art of our current cohort of fellows, who are all right here. So a big hand for them. Philip Hoare was born in Southampton, England in 1958, and he is a writer, an artist, filmmaker, and curator. His books include biographies of Stephen Tennant and Noël Coward, both of which received front cover reviews in the New York Times Book Review and are for sale at the back of the room, so be sure to check them out after the event. The Whale, winner of the BBC Samuel Johnson Prize in 2009, was followed by The Sea Inside and Rising Tide, Falling Star, the latter acclaimed as a masterpiece by The Observer and written as an homage to Provincetown, where he has been a regular visitor since 2001, happy to say. His latest book, Albert and the Whale, led the New York Times to call the author a forceful weather system of his own. And Patti Smith declared it a wonderful book. Patti Smith. Wait, the quote's not finished. A lyrical journey into the natural and unnatural world. Philip's film work, yes, he's a filmmaker, includes the feature-length BBC movie The Hunt for Moby Dick, 3 films he directed for BBC 4's Whale Night, and I Was a Dark Star Always, an installation film about Wilfred Owen, voiced by Ben Whishaw. He has collaborated with John Waters, the Pet Shop Boys, and Ellen Gallagher, among others, because who hasn't? In 2022, he co-curated a major exhibition with the John Hansard Gallery in the UK on the queer artist and filmmaker Derek Jarman. In 2016, Philip and the artist Angela Cockayne curated the www.mobydickbigread.com, for which Melville's novel was read by David Attenborough, Tilda Swinton, Mary Oliver, Benedict Cumberbatch, Tony Kushner, Nathaniel Philbrick, Stormy Mayo, and Stephen Fry, among others. And in 2021, this was followed by www.ancientmarinerbigread.com, in which Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem was read by Iggy Pop, Hilary Mantel, Willem Dafoe, Jeanette Winterson, Rupert Everett, Ali Smith, Alan Bennett, Jeremy Irons, and Marianne Faithfull.
Nobody got a penny either.
Both projects have received, understandably, tens of millions of hits. Philip is a professor of creative writing at the University of Southampton, UK, and a guest tutor at the Rhode Island School of Design, Providence, Rhode Island. He is a regular contributor to The Guardian and swims every day in the sea. Please join me in giving a warm FAWC fellow welcome to Philip Hoare.
Thanks so much, David. That was really thank you. Wow, how do I follow that? That's wonderful. Thank you very much. And this is just like, I'm going to cry because it really is a great honour to be here. I've been coming here for such a long time, and to the Fine Arts Work Centre for such a long time, and seeing all you wonderful people who give one hope. Because art, and democracy, and justice, which this place represents, are vanishing small sometimes. Right, can we have my first picture up, please? And then we'll probably have to have the lights down, I think, for this. So. Adam lies sprawled on the shore. The rocks are washed green by the sea. Whoops. Can I just have that light back? I can't see. Thank you. Just for this reading, thanks. Adam lies sprawled on the shore. The rocks are washed green by the sea. Their newborn body is spread-eagled, arms and hands outstretched. They don't know what they are for. There's a serpent already wrapped round their legs. The ecstasy of creation is on their face. You can see it in the whites of their eyes. God flies over the abyss, bestowing the sentence of humanity, his holy hand held over Adam's fiery head. After all the storms and the planets and the seas, all the whales and the birds and the trees, God decided to make this beautiful creature out of earth and water to hold dominion over them all. God's wings, who made them? Who took the picture? Sprout out of their shoulders like a cape. He's a swan or a dove. The new dawn is already fading. There are clouds in the rosy sky. God knows what he has done. You can see it in his eyes, the anguish in his face. But it's too late. There's no escape. Adam has already been abandoned, stranded on the rocks, something the tide left behind. Maybe it's the sea that's done this to me, spoilt me for the ordinariness of life. Maybe it was a mistake to give myself up to it, to the exclusion of everything else. I came back to do it. It was a dangerous experiment I undertook deliberately. The sea made me permanently unmoored, attached to no one and nothing else, not even myself. Hardly human anymore. The way you always feel strange when you pass yourself in the mirror in the hall or the bathroom. Nothing stays the same. Nothing is built to last. I'm a secret agent of myself, the way that dogs keep themselves to themselves, barely a hint of melancholy, only a furrowed brow or lift of an eye. All dogs are visionaries. They're not here to remind you of yourself. I go back to the sea in the dark, as if nothing had happened. The water is so still I could slide across it. So black it becomes the sky, godlike, all the stars hidden away. If only we knew what God looked like, we'd know what to expect. Either you're in or you're out. The sea comes back to me every night. I come back to it like a stranger. The stars are not of this world, and neither is the sea. I've been all over the world. This is the most exciting place I know. So that's something I've never done, which is reading from something I'm working on, which is a new book, which I finished 2 days ago. Thank you very much. Since the way all my books have really been written and for Provincetown in one way or another, because this place is so elemental and wonderful and strange and beautiful and deadly and vicious and confrontational. The image I was showing is a colour print by William Blake, made in 1795. The mystery of this picture is we still don't really know how it was made. We don't know how he made these colour prints. They're more sculpture than print. When you see them in real life, which I've been lucky enough to do, they're in the Tate Britain in London, but they're held in the archives. They can't be exposed to light for more than once every 15 years. So rather like cicadas, they only come out every so often and burst into consciousness. And it struck me how Blake represents the sea. And the shore that Adam's lying on, there's a wonderful description of Adam newly born. He's described as steaming. Amazing, steaming from being newly born. I say he because I shouldn't. Should be saying they, because Blake believed that in Adam were both sexes at one at the same time. It's only later that becomes divided. Blake believed that gender only existed in time, not in space. And another image which really represents Blake's take on the sea in a more physically deep way is his print of Newton. And this is Newton, the philosopher and scientist, sitting at the bottom of the sea. And he's sitting on a rock which is covered in coral and anemones and crinoids and all sorts of wonders. But what is Newton doing? He's measuring out the world. He's trying to work out the physical presence of the world. While all around him, the most amazing things are living and breathing and existing. What's really amazing about this image, this picture, if you ever see it, is that no one has yet been able to work out how Blake was able to print those plants and animals on the rocks. Not only that, he never saw them in real life. In fact, that shape is actually a urinary stone from a bladder which he'd drawn for a medical encyclopedia. So it's just amazing, and the kind of the colours sort of reflect those of a coral reef. Again, Blake would never have seen that. And Rossetti, Dante Gabriele Rossetti, when he was trying to describe this picture in 1865, he could only liken it to a photograph of seaweed. He was talking about Anne Atkins' cyanotypes of seaweeds. And it kind of made me think about how the sea came, the modern sea, the sea that we know as being something therapeutic or romantic or other than deadly, or somewhere to find food or to transport yourself, came from Blake's time. And these images, which Blake addresses the sea in a sort of tangential way, in the way that it's happening at the edges of the island, come to a really interesting point for me, because I was looking in the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge in England, which has a wonderful collection of Blake's illuminated books. And these are very beautiful prints, and they're tiny, they're about that big. And this is a page from Blake's Prophecy for America. And in his Prophecy for America, he talks about Orc. An Orc is a demon stroke angel, a kind of Satan-like figure who is permanently burning with his own ecstasy. So he's like a Human Torch, he's like a Marvel superhero. And he's this extraordinary, like Godzilla figure in a way. He's described as marching across Boston Common. Blake never went to America. Blake creates this. Blake is writing Star Wars movies before their time, really, in a way. But what really interested me about this image, which is full of wonderful Blakean monsters, that's a wyvern at the top, which is a kind of dragon, but it can fly, but it also can go in the sea. And then there's a kind of figure, a godlike figure, diving down with what looks like a harpoon, which gave me a clue to that strange slumped thing at the bottom of this picture. Well, that looks very like, as Hamlet would say, a whale. And indeed, Blake was living in Lambeth, in London, where London was a whaling port, and so he would have seen chunks of whale lying on the quayside of the River Thames. No one's ever identified this, but I think that's quite clearly. People have talked about it being a tree trunk, but it's completely different to the tree behind. I'm fairly convinced, so I don't know. But then I would be. I see whales everywhere. And it struck me as being really interesting because Blake is painting at the same time as Turner in the same place, central London. In fact, they both lived very close to each other in Soho at one point. And this is an amazing picture, which I'm sure many of you know, and it's a terrible picture. It's the slave ship, the Zong, midway through the Atlantic Passage, and to claim the insurance, they're throwing their living cargo overboard. When you zoom into this picture, and if you see it in the flesh, you can see these strange sea monsters here, which are devouring the enslaved people. And they're sort of mythical whales, the sort of whales that look like Renaissance dolphins, all strange and curly and sort of baroque. But Turner at the same time was painting quite realistic pictures of sperm whales. But what's really interesting is that he was mixing his pigment with spermaceti oil. So he was painting whales with whales. And that also made me think of this image by Fine Art Work Centre fellow Ellen Gallagher, who addressed the notion of those enslaved people falling to the bottom of the Atlantic and creating a new kind of aquatopia where their children became sort of like water babies and developed a whole other culture under the water. And this painting and collage by Ellen, which is very large, this is almost life-size, is fantastically collaged. And she's riffing on Moby Dick. So this is sort of Ahab, sort of Ishmael, only instead of a whale artificial leg, they have tentacles And this amazing afro, which is made with tiny photographs cut from Ebony magazine. It's very much Ellen Gallagher's signature style. And then that made me think of Gallagher's painting Whale Fall. And she became very interested. She'd been working at Woods Hole on looking at watercolors early watercolors of sea creatures. And then she was also linking into the Osedek worm, which is a worm which lives on falling whales. So there's a whole system, evolutionary system, that entirely depends on dead whales. So these whales slowly sway to the bottom of the ocean and are devoured by worms such as the Osedek's worm, and were and have been vital to the ecology of the ocean. They're part of the sacrificial role that the ocean has played in trying to ameliorate the climate crisis, as were indeed the whales, because the whales' feces were helping to sequestrate carbon dioxide, their rotting bodies were also fulfilling that task. So these are very far from the way the whale starts to move through human culture, especially through Moby Dick. This is Rockwell Kent's image. This is a book given to me by Mary Oliver when I was writing my book, The Whale. Beautiful illustrations printed in 1930 of the whale becoming an astro whale, leaping up into the stars. It's almost going to become a constellation of themselves. There is a constellation, Cetus, which you see in winter here. If you're down on the bay at night, you can see Cetus is just rising over the bay. So this notion of this, what Melville refers to as the shaker god incarnate, something very mystical, because Moby Dick is able to be seen in more than one place at the same time. Rockwell Kent really well illustrates that. And it also made me think of planets which astrobiologists are now hypothesizing might have entirely watery atmospheres in which whales fly through. So whales become sort of flying creatures, flying through these the atmosphere of these planets which might yet bear life. And then the way that we saw whales as we were children, especially the sperm whale. So the sperm whale, I don't know about you, I found the sperm whale really scary as a kid. I mean, kind of it is scary. This is a model used in the making of the John Huston film of Moby Dick in 1954, which was for some reason relocated to London Zoo. This is it in London Zoo. Completely bizarre, and it's a fabulous picture, and it looks as though these people are modern-day Joan is about to be swallowed by the whale. And the notion of how we interacted with the whale at the time that Huston was making his movie. When she's, you know that thing at the end of the film that says no animals were harmed in the making of this film? Whales were killed for that film. He actually, in a very Hemingway-esque way, went off to the Madeira and commissioned people to go out and hunt sperm whales for his film. It's amazing. But then considered, up until 1971, the transmission fluid of every American car contained spermaceti oil. So sperm whales are still dying for us in 1971 in America and England, of course. And then it made me also think of this great image, Provincetown, of a stranded whale. Stormy Mayo remembers this whale very well. And this, for me, amazing image that the whales which in Provincetown we are so well aware of around us, when they suddenly become physical and like a sort of sideshow slumped on the beach with people gathered around, it looks like a medieval scene. In the way that sort of people, when they go clamming over the breakwater, that often looks really medieval to me. And so in the next image, next image I was reminded of is my landlady, or my sea lady, with whom I lived for 15 years, 500 Commercial Street, 507, sorry, she wasn't living at 500, was she, Mary? 507 Commercial Street. And I always was intrigued by this photograph she had pinned to her kitchen door, and it's of the orca that she used to feed in the harbour here. which appeared, I think it was 1981, 82. It was 2 years running it came. And Pat used to go out on her kayak with strips and flounder to feed to the whale, as a female orca, to keep the orca, keep her by the boat so that Pat could draw her using a laundry marker. And in fact, Pat also was drawing using stone to draw the whale's fin. It was a female orca, probably a military escapee. If you read the New York Times magazine the other week about Vladimir the beluga, it was another military escapee. And that really made me think about, especially about orca, because they sort of have been set outside our human culture in many ways, as we presume, because we weren't hunting them, so we didn't have an economic concern with them. But it really occurs to me that when I saw my first whale, which is an orca, a captive orca in the Royal Windsor Dolphinarium outside Windsor, as if it was the Queen's own orca, was at the same time as Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, were instigating the great movement, the first great ecological movements, environmental movements of the late 20th century, which have a most visible effect in that they stopped the hunting of the great whales. And that was a fantastic success. But at the same time, in the economic exchange, it's almost one for the other, we started exhibiting captive orca. And 3,600 orca and dolphins are still in captivity throughout the world, kept in incredibly cruel conditions. You wouldn't, you wouldn't treat anyone like that, but a sentient, beautiful animal. I mean, and what struck me when I saw this animal, I was only 14 at the time. I longed all my life to see a whale, and suddenly this whale was like a circus animal, balancing a ball on its nose and jumping through a hoop and being rewarded with a fish. And I had no, I wasn't aware that there was these great moves to protect whales in a whale. That was kind of filtering down to me in my suburban house in Southampton, on the south coast of England. But I was aware soon of the sound of the humpback whale, which suddenly gave a cultural voice to these animals. And Roger Payne and Scott McVeigh, who made those recordings, I was lucky enough to meet both of them. They probably saved the whale, really, because it's when you heard a sentient animal being given a voice, which it had not had there before, that you realise that we're searching for aliens, and Kubrick is making 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the aliens are here with us all the time. It wasn't until the year 2001, ironically, that I saw my first whale here in Provincetown. And it was a real coup de foudre, as the French would say, because I was going back to Logan from Provincetown, from Macmillan Wharf, waiting for the ferry, and I'd mistimed it, and I had three or 4 hours before the ferry went. Anyway, so I saw a whale watch advertised, and very reluctantly decided to go on it, because I thought they're just feeding the whale flounder out there or something. This is kind of be another kind of circus act. And then 40 minutes later, a 40-ton, 40-foot humpback whale breached right in front of me. And being a practiced writer as I already was, I said, fuck. Because there isn't a word for something like that. There's no word to breach that distance between ourselves and this huge animal, which is so clearly mammalian, with this eye looking at you, and these great wings, the barnacled angel of the Megaptera novae, a big-winged New Englander. And that's what anchored me to this place. I felt anchored by the whales. I kept coming back. I'd go on one whale watch a day, 2 whale watches a day, 3. I wouldn't get off the boat, and the captains would look at me really strangely and thinking, who is this weird like me? And John Waters, who was one of the reasons why I came to Provincetown, who had put me up at the White Horse Inn and introduced me to Frank Schaeffer and then gradually into Provincetown itself, said he was worried for my sanity. He said, you become a whale stalker. When I showed him my photographs of whales, he said, that's just whale porn. And he said I had to do something about it, or that, either that or go seek an analyst. And so I started, and yeah, he was right. I had to follow it, but it's been a great obsession. I mean, this place, we're just on a sliver of sand, aren't we? And there are these huge animals around us. As we speak, the right whales came in. This dolphin was stranded on the town beach, just very close to the Macmillan Wharf a few years ago. And Dennis Minsky was tagging the animal and taking samples for I4. And he was doing all the science, and I thought, I want to lie down by the dolphin. And the dolphin, we'd seen the dolphin just a few days ago with her pod. She's a young female. And when they're stranded, dolphins acquire this blush like a peach. It's kind of beautiful. They turn sort of china grey. There's a kind of very beautiful dyeing of the whale or the dolphin. And that sense of, we want to connect with these animals. There's something quite instinctive about it. Maybe it's jealousy, because they don't have to pay mortgages and drive cars. And they left the earth, they left the land, and live in this Edenic place. And sperm whales culture, 24 million years old. Orca culture, 6 million years old. Matrilineal cultures. What are the stories told down those lines? You know, you think of Aboriginal Australians, it's the longest lasting culture on the earth, as that we know, 60,000 years. But these animals reach far, far further back, and they live lived to great ages. Some whales the bowhead whale lives to 300, maybe 350 years old. So their animals are swimming the sea before Melville wrote his book, before the American Revolution. And that sense of wanting to get close to these animals, almost as Pat de Groot used to say, you've got to get close to these animals. Sorry, it's a bad American example. She actually suggested I ought to have sex with them, but that was Pat de Groot. But she was another really important part of my journey into the whale, as were people like Mary Oliver and John. John has never seen a whale. Oh, I think he saw one from the plane once. But he's been coming here for 40 years, and he's never seen a whale. He's like determined not to see a whale. It's kind of really funny. It's like when he comes back, he says the most offensive thing you can send to Provincetown when you come back, is that the same dog as last year? That's a really offensive thing to say in Provincetown. I would find that really offensive. But yeah, so trying to get closer to whales is, I mean, it's problematic because we know they are delicate creatures, however huge they are. But then there is this sense that you want to be close to them. And I managed to get close to them in the islands of the Azores. And I can't tell you, and that's me, I can't tell you what that was like. And I can't tell you what the whale was saying to me. I can't describe that. I can't describe what it's like to be next to an animal like that. I can show you photographs, but I'm not really in those photographs. I might have superimposed myself. This is a female with 4 young. So females, it's a matriarchal society. Males only visit for their sperm. So the females adult females will dive for food. They go maybe up to a mile down looking for squid. Another female is delegated as a babysitter. It's what you call alloparental care. And the large whale here is a female, and she's looking after 4 young, but they're not necessarily genetically related to them. The 4th whale, if you're wondering, is her calf. That's the flukes just there. So the sense of the cohesion and collectedness and cultural presence of these animals, which you feel when you're in the water with them, you know, because their echolocation, their clicks are going, moving through you because they're trying to work out what you are, being physically connected to one another by that sound is something which we have no idea of what that could be like, to be a communal animal in that way. Whales cannot exist without other whales. That's that's part of their whole collection. And Hal Whitehead, a great whale scientist in Dalhousie, was describing to me, I interviewed him the other day, and he was saying how he'd been with a group of sperm whales, and he watched for 2 hours as they tried to make up their mind whether to take a 90-degree turn or not. So he said he could see the whale consensus in operation, whale democracy in operation. It was a real great lesson for us, I suppose. And to me, also, what is vital about these animals is that they are aware of their own beauty. They know they are works of art. This whale is a subadult female that twirled in front of us, turned round and round and round. She's got remarkable markings. It's sort of comme des garçons of a cetacean world, really. Why should that whale, why should that animal, other being, not be aware of their beauty, not be aware of what they're demonstrating when you are lucky enough to be in the water with them, or when you see them from Herring Cove, you know, what they are doing, what they are performing. I think they are, and I know they are aware of us. They're aware of you when you're on the shore. They're aware of you on the shore, and the white seal is aware of you when you're on the shore. And they know very well that we are like them. We are mammalian. We have the same sort of physical makeup. They know that what we are doing to their world. They really, really know that. Because this whale's parents would be born before the introduction of, for instance, steam engines, possibly. So they'd be aware of a silent ocean, or an ocean lacking anthropogenic noise. And now it's pandemonium. It's cacophony for them. If there's one thing that we could do for whales, it would be to really address the use of seismic surveys for oil, of military sonar, of shipping lanes. But yeah, it's one really extraordinary thing we could do. But then we are living at a place where the rarest large whale in the world comes to spend its summers. And we are here in the richest country in the world. And those animals are going to go extinct within all our lifetime. So that's a kind of sad thing. But on a happy note, let's look at some whales. So I think if Naya's there, she's going to help me with the technology, because I'm not very technically proficient. This is a short film. It lasts about 5 minutes. Can we turn these lights as well? Can we turn these lights off? Yeah. Yeah. Shall I? When you, yeah, great. Fantastic. Fantastic. The sound up now. Just pause it. Sorry. Is that? No. Sorry. Just.
In the deep waters of the Indian Ocean,
Louder.
off the west coast of Sri Lanka, large numbers of sperm whales gather each spring to mate. These giant marine mammals live in a world almost completely removed from humans. They possess their own culture, their own memories, their own experience. They dive deep into the ocean to feed on squid, using their sonar clicks to echolocate their food. As we entered their world, the warm waters seemed calm and full of life. But quite suddenly, that mood changed. A little to the north, we came upon a pod of about 30 sperm whales. They were gathered together tightly in a group at the surface. As we dove in the water, we could see the adult males had assembled themselves around the females and their calves. We could hear their sonar clicks. It was an extraordinary experience, a vast biomass of marine mammals. Suddenly, we realised there were other animals involved. The different sound of their whistles and clicks and their black and white markings gave them away. They were orca, and they were attempting to predate the sperm whales. We watched for 3 hours as this drama played out. The 2 pods of orca were diving under the sperm whales, attempting to predate their calves. Tightly clustered, the sperm whales opened and shut their jaws, partly in stress, partly in defence. They were also defecating in the water, creating clouds to obscure the orca's approach. All the while, we could hear the contrasting vocalisations, the sperm whale's deep clicks, the orca's whistles and series of trills. It was a charged and dramatic sight, hardly ever witnessed by human beings before. Eventually, the 2 orca pods appeared to be defeated in their attempt. One pod peeled away, another moved to the north. Then suddenly they dove and reappeared right alongside our little boat. We were surrounded by these incredibly fast, powerful and highly intelligent animals. We had no agency in this situation. All of the choreography of this encounter was entirely under the orca's control. Then they began to circle us, closer and closer. It was the kind of interaction which has been recently seen in European waters off the Iberian Peninsula and the Strait of Gibraltar. It was exciting and incredibly scary to feel ourselves at the centre of another species attention. In retrospect, and probably at the time, we realised that they were playing with us. They could quite easily have tipped over our boat if they chose to. At least one female in the pod had a calf with her. As we looked across the bow of our little boat, 4 of the animals charged directly at us. They were creating the kind of compression wave used by other orca in the Antarctic to tip seals off ice floes and into the water. Then they rammed the boat. Whatever happened out there in the Indian Ocean, it was a remarkable interaction between 3 species: sperm whales, orcas, and human beings. One which, in the light of recent events off European shores, may hold vital clues as to why these highly evolved cetaceans are reacting to our presence in their world. If we could only translate those sounds, the whole mystery might be solved. It's too scary to me to watch. I was actually hiding behind my hands. Because when it was happening, we're 8 nautical miles out from nowhere, and we weren't anywhere anyway. There's no Coast Guard. We had no lifeboat belts, no distress flares, But what really, it was, and it's never been seen by human beings before well, it has been seen but never recorded. But what was really going through our mind is that was the first whale I ever saw, an orca, and they've come to get me. But it was quite funny because we had a scientist on board, a Sri Lankan scientist, who wrote a scientific paper about the thing. And after the orca left us alone, they eventually left us alone, we decided that he had a hydrophone in the water. He pulled it up, and it had been bitten off. So anyway, I shall stop talking now because otherwise... Thank you.
Round of applause. Thank you, David.
Nice to meet you.
What a cool combination tonight. Thank you both for sharing your work with us.
Thank you.
And so I'll ask one question to get us started, and then we'll take audience questions. I was so struck how both of you deal with visual imagery from the past and from writers and artists across time. And it made me very curious about the first visual image that you can remember being really struck by as a child and haunted by, and when that started to kind of dig its claws into you, and you realized you needed to make something from it. A real softball to start.
It actually isn't. I'm trying to think about an example, but I can't come up with a specific image. For me, it's like a cluster of different images. So, sorry, I cannot.
I don't know, but I found when I was digging around in the back of my cupboard in my bedroom, I found a picture of a killer whale I'd painted when I was a kid. And it was because I was so obsessed with them. And it was really badly painted, but it was painted with poster paint. And I borrowed my mum's clear nail varnish to paint over it to make it look glossy and wet. But yeah, it probably was a whale or something like that, a monster. Monsters of the deep.
And so my next question has to do with our fellows who are here for 7 months with us. And both of you have such a deep connection to this place. Is there a hidden secret or a piece of advice that you have for them of something they must do while they're in Provincetown?
Gosh, I don't know. Might incriminate myself. I know my friend Mary, if she's still in the audience, would kill me if I told them certain places where we swim naked. That's probably it, actually.
Swim naked. Arghavan?
So while I was here, I was mostly in my studio. Like Naya and Bob can vouch for me. So, I mean, yeah, I was a boring person, mostly painting in my studio.
So don't leave your studio except to
No,
swim
please do.
naked.
But yeah, I mean, yeah.
So audience, are there any questions? We have time for one or two. Yep.
Yeah, Philip, could you elaborate a little more on what's going on in the Mediterranean and with whales attacking boats?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting story because since about 2021, there have been 500 attacks by orca on leisure craft mostly, yachts off Spain, Portugal, and the Strait of Gibraltar. It's only 15 animals that are doing that. 15 animals. And they are, and I say, we know they are matriarchal animals. They are, in fact, orca culture is almost unique in that the postmenopausal female is the most important member of the group. I know. I know. And they are the ultimate method of cultural transmission. They lead people, whales, I regard them as people, and there's a particular matriarch in this group. They're called the Gladys group. It's nothing to do with being a female's name. It's to do with the original Roman name for the orca, as the gladiator, as a kind of fighter. Sort of pugilistic thing. But this group of 15, they think that this female encountered, had a traumatic encounter with a yacht and possibly damaged her calf. We don't know, but that's kind of a supposition, but it seems to be that, and that they are reacting against the introduction of human, that's been going on forever. I mean, orca lived up to 100 years old, so they will remember when there weren't leisure craft there. They will also remember when there wasn't intensive fishing. We had a photograph from a friend of mine, Joan is a great whale scientist working in Texel in the Netherlands. And he had photographed an orca alongside a tuna fishing boat. So there's a lot of heavy tuna fishing. That's why they're eating there. Orca culture is defined by what they eat, very much like our culture is in a way. This tuna, this orca is alongside this tuna, and the orca is skeletal. You can see its ribs. So their food resource is really being impacted by humans. So although this big thing about Team Orca versus Team Billionaire Yacht, and this whole notion of revenge or whatever is doesn't hold, but there is definitely reaction. And this orca is a global culture. They're more successful than human beings, more successful mammal than human beings, been around for us longer, present in the ocean, have no enemies whatsoever except for humans. And so, yeah, I mean, and this technique is being learned. About 6 months ago, someone's yacht off the Shetland Isles in the north of Scotland was interacted with by an orca. So, it's like the orca who tried to tip us over. We were in equatorial waters. Well, that technique is only of use in polar waters. So, this stuff is culture.
Thank you for that question. One more question over here.
So I've kind of a half-formed question for Arghavan specifically, but also I've had some great things to say about, like, just about why you're drawn to kind of like allegorical and prophetic modes of imagery, like why allegory and not realism, or why realism and allegory. Yeah.
So for me, painting is like a haven or somewhere that I go when I want to escape from reality in a way. So surrealism, or as you said, like these allegorical spaces feels relevant. And I'm interested in depicting moments or situations in my work that in real life they're impossible. So for me, paintings are the realm of the impossible, whether it's positive or negative. But at the end of the day, like for me, the overall take from each painting is something positive towards future. So I hope that answered your question. Yeah. Philip.
It struck me because your work is a kind of medieval world projected into 25th century or something. And I wonder where those things meet. I mean, they meet in your creation of those images. They're extraordinary images, very powerful. And they because they're drawing on what we would regard as a kind of a barbaric time, medieval time, and we're living through a barbaric time again. How do you feel when you...
Yeah, I mean, I feel grounded in present time, in contemporary time. But you're right, there are elements from the past that are coexisting with present. That, as I mentioned in my talk, living in Iran, there are so many elements of the past that are trying to drag you to their own set of beliefs or ideological system. So maybe a part of how my paintings look is because of that. Yeah.
They look sort of post-religion, your images, in a way. I mean, are they...
That's a way, that's an interesting way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're very grateful to have Arghavan and Philip here with us for the remainder of the evening. Please thank our special guests tonight. And do visit the open studios and the gallery and have another glass of wine. Thanks, everyone.